For thousands of years, Austria was not as we know it today. In the first millennium BC, powerful tribes inhabited this region before the Kingdom of Norcum emerged around 400 BC. With the expansion of Rome under Augustus Caesar, this land became part of the empire, and the Romans founded major cities such as Vienna and Salzburg. But towards the end of the 2nd century, with the death of Marcus Aurelian, Germanic tribes began migrating westward and into Central Europe. Austrian lands were home to the Iron Age culture known as Hallstatt until 800 BC. The Illyrians were the first settlers in the region. They remained there until 400 BC, when Celtic migrations displaced the Illyrians and the Norse and Trarian tribes. The Rus, a confederation of Alpine tribes, formed around 500 BC and controlled the Vorarlberg and Tyrolean mountains until 200 BC, when the Celts established the Kingdom of Norcum to the east. At the turn of the century, Norcum came under pressure from the north from Germanic tribes around 15 BC and became part of the Roman Empire, meaning Roman rule over the region we know today. Austria lasted for about 500 years and was relatively peaceful until the reign of Marcus Aurelius, who entered the region in 172 BC to defend it against Germanic incursions. Tribes such as the Macamani Quanti and the Noristi north of Limes threatened the Roman Empire. This can be considered the first time Vienna gained prominence, when the Roman historian Aurelius claimed it as his own. Aurelius died near Vienna. Roman conflict with the Germanic tribes continued after his death, and in 493 AD, Roman rule over what is now Austria ended. Migrations and conflicts continued in the region, with the Avars initially dominating, followed by the Bavarians in the 7th century. In 791, Charlemagne led his Frankish army, joined by the Bavarians, against the Avars, conquering and settling a large part of the region. In 955, King Otto the Fern and the German Confederation defeated the Hungarians, who were joined by Bavarian rebels. Otto's victory brought him prestige and power, which he used to declare himself Holy Roman Emperor in 962. The first written evidence of Austria dates back to 996 AD, when it was mentioned as the Eastern Land, or Ostres, in the local German. This region was part of the German kingdom, and its history began as a military district on Germany's southeastern border. However, as we know, the mention of Ostres by name in 996 did not mark the decisive beginning of Austrian history. The region had a very complex heritage, having been inhabited by various tribes and peoples. None of the groups that lived in what is now modern Austria disappeared. All left their distinctive mark on its lands. The Bavarians formed the largest part of Austrian society, while the Germans constituted the majority in the western regions towards Lake Constance. Thus, the demographics of modern Austria reflect its rich history, with many Germanic, Slavic, Hungarian, Celtic, and even Roman influences still woven into its social fabric. In 976, Leopold the Fünf became the first Margrave of the Babenberg dynasty. The early Babenberg Margraves controlled only a small part of present-day Austria. The Bavarians continued to expand their borders eastward along the Danube River, and by 1002 they had reached the area around present-day Vienna, at which point the region became relatively stable and powerful regional blocks began to form. Austria was bordered to the north and east by non-Germanic Christian kingdoms, Bohemia, Hungary and Poland, and the Austrian Margraves appeared to be minor political players compared to these powerful realms. However, this was not always the case, even within the kingdom itself. Most of the land was not under complete control, remaining under the authority of religious authorities such as the dioceses of Salzburg and Passau. The remainder was subject to the feudal system, and thus to the control of noble families. The area near Vienna began as a Roman encampment, but its location on the Danube River allowed it to develop into a trading centre. The city's commercial advantages increased after the Babenbergs moved their capital to Vienna in 1150, although some accounts suggest this occurred as early as 1145. By the 13th century, the Babenbergs had risen to power, controlling both Austria and Styria through their entrepreneurial and diplomatic skills, often facilitated by marriage. They also forged an alliance with the ruling family of the Holy Roman Empire, the Hohenstaufen dynasty. However, the Babenbergs' success in Austria was short-lived. On August 26, 1278, the Habsburgs defeated their king, Otto Kahr, who had been overthrown by Rudolf I, the second king of Bohemia, at the Battle of the Field March. The Habsburgs became the ruling dynasty of Austria. The Battle of the Field March marked the end of the Babenberg dynasty. The Habsburgs rose to prominence, becoming the imperial rulers of the Holy Roman Empire, but their ambitions extended far beyond. Austria was merely a small element, a springboard for a dynasty that would eventually conquer Europe. The emergence of the Habsburgs, who originated in Switzerland, on the political scene transformed the meaning of being Austrian. This meaning persisted even after a long period of political instability following the death of Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II Rudolph, the first king of Germany, through whom the Habsburgs became kings of Germany. They were also known as the court kings, a term coined by historians to distinguish the rulers who reigned until 1438, when the Habsburgs finally seized the throne. Imperial title: the Habsburgs claimed the lands of Austria, Styria and Carniola, which Rudolf divided between his two sons. In the 14th century, Albrecht I and Rudolf II, by mutual agreement, became the sole heirs to the Habsburg lands. The mantle of the German Empire was up for grabs, and the Habsburgs won it, but power struggles in Germany weakened the Habsburgs and undermined their interests in their Swiss stronghold. In 1313, the forces of the Permanent League raided the Ansidum Abbey, and in 1315 they defeated Leopold Habsburg's army. This was a turning point not only in the history of Switzerland, but also in the history of the Habsburg dynasty. The League grew in power, and in 1315 it transformed into a confederation. By the 15th century, the Habsburgs were marginalized and expelled. From their homeland in Switzerland, the confederation held sway. Under Frederick I, the Habsburgs began to call themselves Austrians, or dominions of Austria. They ruled Austria in the 14th century. However, the Habsburg dynasty remained divided. In 1379, Albert III gained control of Upper and Lower Austria. While Leopold III ruled all the other territories for another century, the Habsburg lands remained fragmented. The Habsburg kingdom split again in 1396, with further changes occurring throughout the 15th century. Two ruling dynasties emerged, the Leopoldian and the Albertian, but brothers and cousins continued to compete for their inherited lands. The Austrian kingdom was divided into three parts: Lower Austria, present-day Lower Austria; Upper Austria, Inner Austria, the Adriatic lands, Carniola, Corinth and Styria; and Upper Austria and Tyrol. With Habsburg possessions in Swabia and Alsace remaining, the Habsburg family continued to grow in wealth and influence. Albert II, King of Germany, later Duke Albert V, married the daughter of Sigismund, King of the Holy Roman Empire. Albert continued to inherit this title, with some claiming he was officially the first Holy Roman Emperor of the Habsburg dynasty, although this claim belongs to Frederick III, who succeeded Albert. Internal conflicts soon culminated in a civil war in 1404. Austria underwent a series of profound transformations in the 15th and 16th centuries due to religious wars, Ottoman conquest, and internal conflicts within the Habsburg dynasty. Following the Hussite Wars and escalating religious persecution, Ottoman expansion posed an existential threat to Europe, prompting the Habsburgs to consolidate their control over the region for centuries to come. Emperor Maximilian I reunited the Austrian lands, which had been divided since the 14th century, but the rise of the Protestant Reformation triggered a new wave of division, followed by a counter-reformation that further destabilized Central Europe. The Habsburg borders were constantly shifting due to religious conflicts and wars with the Ottomans. Although the Danube region prospered thanks to trade routes, economic influence gradually shifted towards the Adriatic Sea and Western Europe, leading to economic decline in parts of Austria. Amid these religious, economic and military crises, Austrian territory was once again divided into Upper and Lower Austria, each under separate rule, deepening the instability of the era. Following the reunification of Austrian lands, the 17th century faced major challenges, most notably the 30 Years' War, which ended in Austria's defeat and the decline of its Catholic influence. This coincided with the collapse of its economy and the rise of colonial powers in Western Europe. With the Peace of Westphalia and the end of the 80 Years' War, the Habsburg dynasty's power began to gradually wane. During this period, a tripartite political system emerged, based on the sharing of power between the ruling dynasty, the church, and the aristocracy, a system that left a lasting mark on Austrian history. In the 18th century, the country underwent significant reforms under Maria Theresa and her son, Joseph II, but it remained firmly committed to Catholicism, leading to continued persecution of Protestants. Beyond Austria's borders, Russia made significant gains in Eastern Europe during the Russo-Turkish War, while the French Revolution introduced new ideas, rationalism and national unity that posed a direct threat to Habsburg rule and were subsequently suppressed. The Napoleonic Wars further weakened the empire and contributed to the spread of nationalism and liberalism across Europe. As uprisings escalated in Vienna and other regions, pressure mounted on the Habsburgs, ushering in a new era of political change in the region. Following Austria's defeat in the war against Prussia in 1866, it was forced to restructure its political system, leading to the compromise that resulted in the creation of the dual empire of Austria-Hungary. The Habsburg monarchy became shared, with Hungarians ruling Hungary and Austrian Germans ruling Austria, while the Habsburgs remained at the head of the entire entity. This period witnessed a remarkable cultural flourishing, economic expansion, and the rise of liberal thought during the second half of the 19th century. But this prosperity began to wane towards the end of the century. At the dawn of the 20th century, tensions between the major powers, Russia, Austria, the Ottoman Empire, and the Western European states, escalated, ultimately erupting into World War I. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 plunged the Austro-Hungarian Empire into the heart of the conflict, after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand ignited a war for which it was ill-prepared. As the fighting intensified, nationalist movements within the empire grew stronger, and its multi-ethnic unity gradually fractured. By 1918, the home front had completely collapsed, the empire disintegrated, and Austria emerged as a small, economically and politically weak state. During the interwar period, Austria faced hyperinflation, unemployment and intense political conflict, while extremist movements gained strength throughout Europe. This turmoil ultimately led to Austria's annexation by Nazi Germany in 1938 in the Anschluss, and Austria lost its independence until the end of World War II. After the war ended in 1945, Austria was divided into Allied occupation zones, remaining so until 1955, when the Austrian State Treaty was signed, restoring full independence to the country. Austria declared its permanent neutrality, which helped solidify its image as a stable nation in the heart of Europe. In the latter half of the 20th century, Austria experienced significant economic growth, and the beginnings of a modern welfare state emerged based on education, healthcare, and advanced infrastructure. In 1995, it joined the European Union, further solidifying its economic and political standing. Today, Austria is one of the most stable and prosperous countries in Europe, combining a rich imperial history, a vibrant culture, and a robust economy built on technology, tourism, and advanced industries, making it a model of stability in the modern era. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.